Hello, friends. Today, I want to talk about the downsides of living in Montenegro. I won't be speaking about the negatives from my own perspective because, in my opinion, there are far fewer of them than some people tend to think. I've written down what is most often mentioned online, right here on this piece of paper. And I want to share how I feel about what people write. So first of all, well, it's very often said that everything in Montenegro dies out in the off season. In my opinion, that's complete nonsense. Some suburbs really do become deserted. Well, probably almost all the suburbs. So if you come, let's say from for example, from the city, then in the off season there really will be some closed businesses, and there will be far fewer people. It might be boring for some, although for those who are looking for a peaceful, secluded life, this would be perfect. I know people like that. For example, I have a musician among my clients. He used to live in the city, but he couldn't work there. It was too noisy for him here. He needs silence. He moved to live in Kumbar and is living wonderfully, enjoying life, especially in the off season. He says, everything dies down. There's no one from the neighbors for two houses around me. No one bothers me. So that's what concerns the suburbs. As for the central cities, well, what I call the central cities, that's just how we usually refer to them. These are Budva, Kotor, Tivat, Bar. All of these cities are lively year round. In none of these cities will you find a situation where everything is closed and there's nowhere to go in the off season. No, everything is open. By the way, I want to specifically mention the cafes that used to close for the winter. This is something people often write about as well, saying that everything dies out and 90% of the cafes are closed. Some cafes do indeed close, and in the suburbs there are quite a few closed cafes, while in the city centers only a few close, but the majority remain open. The ones that do close aren't shutting down because it's impossible to make money in the off season. Usually, these are bad cafes that don't have much of a regular clientele. In other words, they only cater to tourists, since for tourists it's not that important. Today, one person arrives, tomorrow, if he doesn't like something, he leaves, and someone else comes instead. And for them during the season, it's easy for such cafes to survive. Out of season, though, the question arises that people go where the quality is good. The ones who stay here aren't tourists who just arrived, who don't know anything and hop from one cafe to another to try things out. They look around, oh, this cafe looks nice, the picture is pretty, let's go in and check it out. The food isn't great. Well, okay, next time we won't go there. But for us, next time there will be other people who come to the same cafe to try it out. Maybe someone will even like it. But when you're working for people who live in Montenegro permanently, you really have to attract them with quality. That's why cafes that can't attract people with quality sometimes close down out of season. Or there's a second option, and there are relatively few of these, but it does happen. You'll find a summer only cafe without a winter terrace. And they prefer to just work during the summer and then not bother, since in winter their ability to accommodate people is limited. That's how it is. But good cafes are open all year round. For example, if you go to Galioto in Denovićivić, by the way, isn't even a central city in Montenegro, but rather a suburb where there are usually far fewer people. It's always packed with people there, and we often go there ourselves. Whenever I visit, I always see someone I know. In other words, people don't mind spending 20 minutes to get to this cafe because the food there is really good. It's good, and by the way, the prices are quite reasonable. They don't even consider the idea of closing for the winter. They make money both in the summer and in the winter. In fact, I think they earn about the same in both summer and winter. Right. The next thing people often write is Montenegro is boring out of season. There's a certain group of immigrants here who don't do anything. That is, they live off income from their home country. For example, some people own a number of properties somewhere in Moscow, or Kiev. It doesn't really matter where. They rent them out, get the money, and just hang around here. They spend half the day lying on the beach and the other half complaining that they're bored. When the beach season ends, they have absolutely no idea what to do with themselves. That's how it is. But working is against their religion. I watch them. Sometimes a person will spend 2 years just lying on the beach, then think, God, I'm so tired, I'm so bored, what should I do? And then, lazily picking their nose, they'll say, I should start some kind of business. But a year later, he's back to the same thoughts with his finger in his nose, thinking he should start some kind of business. But of course, nothing ever comes of it. He just lies on the beach for half the day, bored. That's it. The solution is simple. You need to start working, either get a job somewhere, actually start a business, or do some freelancing. And you won't be bored. I observe those who work there, a lot of them here. In fact, they're the majority. There are actually relatively few lazy people who just sit around doing nothing. Most people are working, and I've never once heard any of them say they're bored. But those who really have nothing to do are constantly bored and always complaining. But I don't know what kind of country you'd have to live in to do nothing and still somehow have fun. In my opinion, it would be boring anywhere. All right. The next downside, which people also often mention, not enough variety of goods. And yes, not enough variety of goods. I completely agree. That's exactly how it is. I won't argue with that. For there to be enough variety of goods, there's only one solution: you have to travel. Not necessarily to go somewhere specifically for shopping, but just to travel and shop along the way. For example, this year we were in Belgrade and did some shopping. We were in Zagreb and did some shopping. I go to Podgorica for work almost every week, sometimes even twice a week. There too, the selection is better than on the coast. So you need to get out and travel if you just stay put in your own city. No matter what it's called, Erceg Novi, Budva, Bar, Kotorte range of goods will really be too limited, not as extensive as you like. For example, I brought my robot vacuum cleaner from Croatia. I've mentioned this in many videos. Don't say I'm repeating myself. So why did I bring it from Croatia? Because the model I wanted wasn't available in Montenegro. Ah. As for this clothing, I bought this piece right here in Herceg Novi. I also brought my computer from Croatia. Why? Uh, uh, the computer was for my wife, not because the selection of laptops is worse in Montenegro, and not because they're somehow more expensive. The price is about the same, but by buying it in Croatia as a foreigner, I was able to get a VAT refund, so it ended up costing me about 20% less. So what else? I also brought my camera from Croatia. Why? Because that model wasn't available in Montenegro. Of course, there is a certain selection of cameras here, but I specifically wanted this one. It wasn't available here. I found it in Croatia, went there, bought it, and brought it back. So, in other words, this is one way to deal with the situation. Travel and combine your trips with shopping. Exactly. What do I personally really miss? I can't say that there are any goods missing because everything is basically available either here or in a neighboring city in Croatia or in the nearby city of Trebinje, or you can order something from AliExpress. So in principle, you can actually buy everything you need. The only thing I miss is parks. I mean, there are parks, but let's just say I've seen much better ones in other countries. So instead of parks, there's a gorgeous embankment. Well, not even an embankment, but a promenade. And in each region is kind of unique where you can walk, ride electric scooters, or I don't know, for example, sit on a bench and eat corn. Yeah, but I have this thing where besides the promenade, I also need parks. Here, yeah. The next downside, which is also mentioned very often, all the time, I read the country is poor, salaries are low. Well, let's break down this downside point by point. First of all, no one hides the salary amount. It's known even before you move here. If for some reason you don't like the salary, if you suddenly want to work in Montenegro, well, then honestly, why did you even come here in the first place? What are you upset about now? Two, second point, very few Russians come to Montenegro to work. Mostly, there are a lot of workers in Montenegro from Bosnia, Serbia, Macedonia, and there are Albanians as well. But there are very few Russians specifically. The main reason is that the workers do not have the opportunity to obtain permanent residency and citizenship in the future. So for Russians, since this is important, Russians almost always emigrate by opening a company in Montenegro or by buying real estate, because these grounds for obtaining a residence permit make it possible to get permanent residency and citizenship in the future, which is important for us. Probably for Serbs, this is not so important. That's why Serbs go to Montenegro en masse for work. In Montenegro, salaries are a bit higher than in Serbia. But for Russians, this is important. Accordingly, there are only a handful of Russian workers here. So again, I don't understand why everyone complains that salaries in the country are low. Yes, salaries in the country are low, but you still don't go there for work. What's there to worry about? Yes. Next, 500 euros is about twice the model salary in Russia. Just to be objective, I completely agree that salaries in Montenegro are low, but in the regions of Russia, in most regions, people work for 200 to 300 euros. I'm talking about the model salary now, not the average salary. The whole world takes into account minimum and model salaries. Very few people focus on the average salary. And in Montenegro, the model salary is significantly higher than in the regions of Russia. Again, just pointing this out for the sake of objectivity. Yes, I remember 10 years ago, Russians were eagerly consuming all the internet information about how poorly people lived in the Baltic countries. Now, when model salaries in the Baltics are already about 4 to 5 times higher than in the regions of Russia, I noticed that the hysteria about this has somehow died down. I think the same thing will eventually happen with Montenegro. Another, I don't know how many, probably 15 years will pass, and people in the Russian regions will be thinking, why didn't we go to Montenegro when we had the chance? Now we could be living 5 times better. This is exactly the situation that happened with the Baltics, And that will someday also occur in the difference between Russian and Montenegrin salaries. I don't know when, but it will happen. Mold. Well, everyone writes that there's mold there, that the climate is humid. But first of all, the climate really is humid. We'll talk about that in the next point. Secondly, a cheapskate pays twice. Whether you're buying or renting, it depends on whether you're purchasing or renting property in Montenegro. Make sure it's of good quality. I've talked about this in many videos. By the way, I often get criticized for this. People say, why are you offering such expensive apartments? Show us the cheap ones. Guys, a cheapskate pays twice. If you don't want to deal with mold, buy proper real estate. There won't be any mold, or there will be very little of it. There, you'll just need to clean it once every 3 or 4 years using special chemical products. That's it. But if you buy a really good apartment and if you air it out regular, that is, if you take all the necessary measures, then there won't be any mold at all. And the last downside that people often mention is that apparently Montenegro has a humid climate. Excuse me, did you want to live on the coast or are you heading to the Sahara Desert? If you wanted to live on the coast and you came to the coast, then naturally the coast has a humid climate. So I honestly don't understand why or how this could even be considered a downside. All right, friends. My name is Dimitri. You can contact me with any questions about immigration and life in the country. Goodbye, everyone.